Outstanding work of our change agents and Dr. Johnny Cruz Craig. We worked on different topics, not just the normal thing. You know, we worked on culturally relevant teaching, social and emotional learning, trauma-informed classrooms, and the whole child, just to name a few.
In terms of what you all are doing and what it means to us and what it means to everyone, education is a foundational key. I think it was George Washington Carver that said education is the key to freedom, which is the tie and the link between education and social action.
Delta pushed early on that it's not just matriculating through a scripted curriculum that may not teach needed life and adaptive skills. We have been pushing through our gyms and other programs that you need to focus on educating the whole person so that our next generation has the basic life skills to navigate and adapt in now an even more demanding and unrelenting world environment.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program. My name is Pamela Tola Criswell, and I am participating from Creedmoor, North Carolina in Granville County. We are so excited to be sharing tonight's program with you and are looking forward to the conversation and lessons that will be learned from it. I am honored to be working with an amazing team of women hailing from various places in North Carolina. Hey, so let's meet them now. Saida, tag, you're it.
Hello, I am Saida Smith Williams. I'm a resident of Alamance County, but I'm assistant principal in Caswell County. And I would like to say we are about to have a great time. So let me introduce my other sister, Tia. Tag, you're it.
Hi, my name is Tia Gillum Wilson. I am a third grade teacher at Elon Elementary School. Tag, Consuela, you're it.
Good evening. My name is Consuela Chambers Banks, and I am representing Wake County, where I serve as a middle school counselor. Pamela, tag, you're it.
As participants in the TAG program, which stands for Teachers Advocating to Lead Great Change, our focus has been on educational equity. While tonight's focus may not be entirely about education, it is certainly about becoming educated and equity. Our team decided it was important for people not to stop with the census and or the election. So we decided to address this by hosting this important social action conversation. Throughout this year, we've been told how important it is to complete the census and how important it is to cast our votes. Well, we've done that. So now what? We want to know the next steps. What should we, as citizens of North Carolina, do to make sure that our counting and our voting truly mattered? And we've gathered together an amazing group of panelists to help us with this conversation. Saida, Consuela, tag, you're it.
As Pamela said, we have gathered together an awesome group of advocates and social action warriors who are very active in their communities. I have been given the pleasure of introducing them to you tonight. However, before I bring up our panelists, I would like to share with you that the views and opinions expressed by the speakers and or other third parties in DTEC-TAG digital programming do not necessarily reflect those of the DTEC-TAG partners. This programming is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. No user should act on the basis of any material contained in the webinar without obtaining proper legal or other professional advice specific to their situation. Okay. So our first panelist for tonight is Dreama J. Caldwell. Dreama is a native of Alamance County and educated in the public schools of the county. She received an associate's in applied sciences in early childhood education. Dreama married Alexis Caldwell in 2007, and she has a blended family of 5 adult children, 2 biological and 3 stepchildren. Dreama spent 25 years in education before transitioning to a career in hospitality. She has since turned her sights to the political realm and ran for the county commissioner of Alamance County in 2020. Her attempt was unsuccessful, but she received 34,000 plus votes. She continues the work of community building as a community organizer for a local grassroots organization. Dreama has compassion for all people, especially in Alamance County, and wants the residents to have a voice. She seeks to use her education and workforce experiences to help reestablish the county's voice. Dreama's goal is to ensure that the Alamance County government is fair, equitable, and inclusive to all residents, and that they fully fund schools for all children. She seeks to make sure children have equal access to resources and facilities and engage in social justice reform. We are excited to welcome Dreama Johnson Caldwell to our panel tonight.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Consuela. And thank you, NC TAG, for having me.
Great. Our next panelist is Jawan Mitchell. Jawan Mitchell, currently employed by a global innovation and engineering consulting firm, is a resident of Wake County. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from St. Augustine's University, where she was also initiated into the Gamma Rho chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. After graduating from St. Aug, She continued her clinical psychology work at North Carolina Central University. Jawan is the immediate past president of the Knightdale Wake Forest chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. She served in this position from July 2015 to June 2019. Currently, she is the chapter social action chair, focusing on systematic racism and the impact on voting, the 2020 census, and police brutality. Jawan is a member of the local chapter of the NAACP, St. Augustine's University Alumni Association, executive board member of the NC Community of Coalitions, and on the leadership team for the Northeast Community Coalition. She volunteers a lot in the Northeast area of Wake Forest to help eradicate food insecurity and voting passiveness while educating the residents about their individual rights. Welcome, Jawan Mitchell, to our panel tonight.
Thank you for having me. And I did leave out one important information. I am the mom of a 12-year-old schnauzer named Rocky.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Up next, we have Seneca Rogers. Seneca Rogers, 40 years old, is an Alamance County native and a proud graduate of Cummings High School. Following high school, he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science at North Carolina A&T State University. And he wanted me to share this. Aggie pride. He and his wife, Shakitha, have been married for 12 years. They currently do not have any children. They are both members of Arches Grove, UCC in Burlington. Seneca is currently employed with LabCorp of America, where he works as a third-party reimbursement analyst. His educational experiences and conversations with people in his community drew him in as an advocate to collaborate with their diverse populations to obtain the goals of increasing student achievement and well-being. Let's welcome Seneca Rogers.
Hello, everybody. Thank y'all for having me tonight. Thank you for the invite.
All right. And last but not least, we have with us Keith Sutton. Keith Sutton is an education innovator, a public servant, an entrepreneur, and advocate for children and families who has married his passion for education to his expertise in relationship management. Sutton is the founder of Focus Ed LLC, a firm designed to support organizations in the improvement and transformation of education. Prior to Focus Ed, he spent time as an excellence director for Best NC, an education think tank committed to improving North Carolina's education system through policy and advocacy. A Rocky Mount, NC native, Sutton has served his community in Raleigh for nearly 2 decades through work on boards and committees, including the state's NAACP, Triangle Urban League, Healthy Schools Task Force, Raising Achievement and Closing Gaps Task Force, the Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, the Southeast Raleigh Assembly, and the Blue Ribbon Committee on the Future of Wake County. Sutton has served as a member of the Wake County Board of Education since 2009 and currently serves as the school board chair. He also served as the board chair in 2013. He is a member of the Triangle East chapter of 100 Black Men, Unity Lodge number 64 of Prince Hall Masons, and the Iota Iota chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity. Let's welcome our final panelist, Keith Sutton, to the screen. Yes, yes.
Thank you. Good evening. Glad to be here and want to shout out to Patsy Simpson. I just saw her make a comment there, who's a board member, educator, and elected official there in Alamance County. So good evening, Patsy.
Great. As we continue this conversation, I would love to bring Saida back so she can facilitate our continued discussion.
Wow. First, I am super excited, and I hope all the audience is super excited. I'm seeing all of these shouts out from Dreamer and Miss Jawan and Keith and Seneca. Not only do you have wonderful things to say, but you have a bunch of people behind you listening and rooting you on. Now, audience, this is a perfect time for you to grab your pen, paper, make sure you share, like, record, because we're about to start with this greatness. You will notice that it's going to be two screens. I will be speaking on one, and then there will be a diagram on the other. Now, audience members, none of our panelists know what these pictures are about. 2020 has been a tumultuous year, but it also has been a year of greatness and discern. We are asking our panelists to pretty much describe social justice, their social passion, change, defining their why through the process of illustration. During these pictures, each panelist will be given one picture in which they have never seen the picture before, but hopefully it is noted and they may have seen it in an article. Once they have seen the picture, each panelist will then talk about how that picture directly relates or reflects their passion, their why, and one of the reasons we are speaking to them today. I'm hoping you're as excited as I am, and I hope you have that pen and paper or pencil ready to go ahead and jot down the knowledge that each of them are going to tell you. We will follow the same order as we did before, where we will start off with Dreamer, then Miss Jawan, then Seneca, and then Mr. Keith at the end to discuss some of these illustrations. I'm hoping you're as ready as I am. To ensure that we are able to talk about it, we're going to make sure that we eliminate myself as well as another screen. So you may see me in the background, but I'm definitely will be talking to you, or you may see me in a small icon. Are we ready for this to happen? All right.
Ready.
All right, audience, are you ready? Hopefully I can hear you in the chat room saying you're ready, and they told me to represent North Carolina, and I believe in representing North Carolina. So are you ready, North Carolina and beyond, for this great conversation? Very first one, we will show you a diagram. Dreamer, this will be your turn. This will give you an opportunity to go ahead and have open discussion. This is from your heart. It will be because it's impromptu and you have no idea what this picture is all about. So we're getting ready to show that picture to you. Dreamer, are you ready for your illustration?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. Let's go ahead with the very first one. What does this picture mean? Tell me, how does this picture explain your passion, and how did it help you or help others to participate in the social action?
So it looks like I'm looking at people are waiting to vote, and it talked about absentee voting, which was my passion this year. Something happened. The silver lining to Corona happened this year, where people were able to request absentee ballots online, or they could register online. And so we were excited and saw people who used both, people who braved and came out and stood in line with us out at the polls, and then people who also still did their civic duty, but did it from the comfort of their home and did absentee voting. And basically, it's just reminding people how important their voting is. And that was kind of the theme this year, because so many people in our community had disengaged and just truly believed their vote didn't count. And so we had to take time to have conversation with people to explain that their vote did count, and they were needed in this process.
Conversation has gotten so enlightened and so hot. We would love every single panelist. We're going to start off. Jawan, you can go next, and then Seneca, and then Keith, still talking about this picture, and then we'll go to the next picture.
For myself, this year, was my first time doing absentee voting. And I heard a lot of people saying, I don't trust the system, it's not going to work. And a lot of the politicians were putting out the false narrative. As I said, I did the absentee voting, and I tracked each step from the point that I submitted the request to the point that when I put it in the mail and it was tracked. It was a safe process, and I felt very confident along the way because, again, you were able to track it. When you're unaware of things, it's best to do the research and don't always rely on someone else to give you the knowledge. I was at the polls on the day of election, and I saw people who did not read in advance. They thought that they could register on the day of the election. And that process was, of course, during the early voting. And I think it's very important for us to continue to spread that message because everyone is not going to read the same thing you're reading or interpret it the same way.
Absolutely. Seneca, and then Keith.
Yep. Yeah, the absentee voting was really big this year. I mean, if you saw the results coming in from North Carolina, from the different states and times of this year, you saw how big absentee voting was, especially during a global pandemic of what we were dealing with. And then I didn't do the absentee voting myself. I actually voted in person since I was a candidate running for school board this year here in Alamance County. I was out there one evening and I just went in and voted myself when the line had got shorter. But I know the lines were longer this year, and it just seemed like so many people were excited to actually get out to vote, which was very encouraging because a lot of people don't feel like that voting does anything for them. And so being out there trying to push people to vote, doing absentee voting, making sure that they were registered. I mean, actually helping people register registration drives this year and things. And my brother, he actually did the absentee voting because he was a person who was high risk. So he didn't want to go and stand in a line. And he just thought the process was just so easy that he's talking about in the future, that's probably just going to be the way that he's going to continue to go. So he just liked that, like Jawan said, doing it from the comfort of your home, sitting there on the couch or at the dining room table or something like that. So absentee voting was very big this year.
Wonderful. And then Keith, you're up to talk about absentee voting.
Okay, actually, I'll be honest. When I first saw this picture and you asked for my first reaction, I was wondering if this picture was from this year because I don't see any social distancing going on. So I'm hoping that's a couple of years old. But in all honesty, you know, when I think about the election this year and I see the lines, you know, it actually sort of strikes me, and I have a mixed feeling when I see this picture. You know, we had record turnout in communities across the state. We had record turnout in the African American community, and we saw all sorts of efforts to turn out the vote, both during early voting, during absentee voting, and actually on election day. And I was really overwhelmed when I went out and looked at polls on election day and saw that we didn't have any long lines. There were folks, quite honestly, like Jawan Mitchell and some of her sorors from Ninth Wake Forest Chapter that were at a polling place providing food to people that were waiting in line. But unfortunately, there were not people waiting in line because most people had either had voted absentee or voted early in the early vote. And so that was a really good thing. And again, we saw record numbers. The other part that is disappointing is that even with a record effort and record turnout, we still fell short in a lot of areas. Obviously, we were successful on the federal level with the presidential race, but we saw really massive losses, particularly here in North Carolina, where we lost every seat on every Democratic seat. On the judiciary, we lost the Chief Justice, Sherry Beasley, the first opportunity we had to elect an African-American female to Chief Justice, and we lost that opportunity. We lost ground in the state legislature, local races. I saw board members from across the state that had sat in their seats for 25 years plus and lost their races. So we really took a tremendous hit in spite of a record turnout. And so that concerns me as we look forward in elections and that sort of thing. That's concerning.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you all for your responses. We do have a couple other photos and they give you a glimpse, audience, of who our panelists are. And they have given you such wonderful information. Now, Ms. Jawan, you are going to go first with the next picture. And are you ready for the impromptu picture you are about to see?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get ready to demonstrate that impromptu picture. And panelists, I know some of you are going to have a little bit more time than others, but I really want you to concentrate on what this actually means to you. What do you think about this picture? What do you think about this year? And what is the direct reflection of this picture?
What I see is youth involvement, and it's going to take the youth to change the country. They are unafraid. They are ready for change. And I think they're very tired of hearing this is the way we've always done things. They are ready to act, and it's up to us to help them, to guide them, but not tell them what to do. I see 2020, the year 2020 is a year of transition. I turned 50 this year, and it wasn't the way I wanted to bring in my 50th birthday party, but thankfully I'm here. I have relatives that have been negatively affected by 2020. They have COVID-19. If the president that's currently in office had done the right things, we would not have so many people that are dying or suffering. And it's people that look like me and you. We oftentimes think it's not going to happen to me. I'm invincible. And I think that's the thing of young people see that as well. They're invincible. It's not going to happen to them. So we don't take the precautions we need to take. And again, 2020 is a year of transition. And I see the upcoming years a year of change. It's up to us to be that change, and we can do it. Thanks.
Wonderful. That was a wonderful share. Thank you. Thank you. It'll be followed by Seneca and then Mr. Keith once again, and it'll close out with Dreamer.
When I see the picture, I do think about the youth. I do think about how their involvement has become so big, and just seeing them throughout the year. And just looking at the sign of 2020, it makes me just reflect back on coming into the year. Everything that you were seeing was about this 2020 vision. Everybody had this vision for what they were going to be doing or trying to accomplish in 2020. And then everything in 2020 changed. I mean, schools got shut down. Businesses got shut down. Everything started happening from your living room, from your dining room, dens and everything, schools. I mean, your house became a multifunctional facility, from basic being your gym, being your workplace, being the school for kids and things. But then also too, I see in this a celebration, because you found a new way to celebrate. It looks like he's a graduate. And for me, I know I had a cousin who graduated high school this year. He didn't get to walk across the stage as normal. It had to act in a different way out in the parking lot, and his mother and father riding in the car next to him. But we still got to celebrate him. We still was able to do parades and stuff. Birthday parades happened this year. I mean, I think a lot of people love the birthday parades. I mean, my wife actually ended up with a birthday parade here at our home with her friends from work. So I think 2020 showed great transition, showed things that changed for us, and some things that we lost out on, like proms and the true celebrations of birthdays. But I think it did bring in some new things too, with the Zoom calls, with the birthday parades, with the graduation parades and things. It did show some new things that we can still use going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would, and I'll be brief, but I echo Seneca's thoughts. What I see is a celebration of community, and that in a year like the one that we just had, and as a school board member, we struggle with figuring out trying to find ways to honor our graduates last year in 2020. But communities stepped up, churches stepped up, community organizations stepped up, families stepped up and put together parades and celebrations like this with cars and pictures on the side of cars and balloons. And so what you see is really a strong and resilient community. And that, I think is reflected, particularly in the African American community. We are strong, we're determined, we're resilient. And even in a time of what seems like loss, we found ways to come together and still celebrate, given the means and the resources that we have to ensure that in this case, our graduates and our young people felt honored and celebrated.
Absolutely. And close it out for us, Dreamer.
Hi. So exactly what everyone else has said, but I see resilience, and I think that this has been the year that we have seen our youth be resilient they've missed prom, they've missed graduation. But yet we still see people who were graduating and determined to go to college. And there's a saying that's a very popular saying, one monkey doesn't stop the show. So Corona doesn't stop things completely. We found ways to adapt. We found ways to celebrate. And this is important, that we celebrate all children and that we celebrate the milestones that children have. And so we are resilient as a community. We are resilient as a people. So no matter, none of us know what lies ahead with COVID-19, but no matter what it is, we will rise to that occasion. Like Seneca said, I have attended Zoom birthday parties. I've attended baby showers on Zoom, and soon I will attend my first facial on Zoom. So resilience is the word. When I see this picture, I see nothing else but resiliency, which after this election, we will be resilient as a community and we will rise and continue the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we have a couple more pictures, and so this will be a good time for our audience member. By now, you probably have selected an individual on our panelists who directly reflects your passion, and they're actually echoing many of the different things that you are saying. I would love for you to join us, whether you're listening to us or watching us on Facebook Live or YouTube, to comment, because we can see those comments. So comment and tell us how you feel, what's going on, and your reflection too on those pictures. So I'm going to start the third picture off with Seneca. And are you ready for the third picture? This one is Fire and Fury, third picture. And please let us know directly what is on your mind.
What directly is on my mind when I look at this picture is the uprising. The uprising of people not wanting to stay at the status quo no longer. People wanting to see their community become what they know it can truly become. And in that uprising, sometimes it will be fear, sometimes it will be fury, sometimes it will be fire, sometimes it will be loud, and it needs to be. You can no longer just sit back and be quiet in this time. So you have to have an uprising. And that's what we done saw this year. We done seen basically the biggest global uprising from here in North Carolina all the way to Australia, Britain. You done saw people getting out into the street even during the pandemic to basically manifest and demand the change they want to see. No longer just sitting back and waiting for it to happen, waiting for somebody else to step up and do it. Actually getting out there themselves and putting the feet to the flames of making it happen. And so when I look at this, when I see them flames and I see a person flexing up, that just shows me power of an uprising.
Absolutely. So we're going to follow this with Keith, then back to Dreama, and then closing will be Ms. Juwan. And you are muted, Mr. Sutton. No worries.
Sorry. I see rage. When I see this picture, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And just, really not generations, I would say, not even a generational lifetime, but generations of racism, frustration, discrimination, persecution, unfairness, all just sort of boiled in and boiling over, quite honestly, particularly in youth and our young people, but really all over the country, and as Seneca said, all over the world. And so that's what I see in this picture through the actions and the flames and everything. Is just just rage.
I think for me, I'm reminded of the statement from Martin Luther King, who said that riot is the language of those who are unheard. And so we're looking at a picture of people who are unheard. And what has happened is that as people hit the tipping scale, these fires and rages and things begin to happen. As a community organizer, I may not personally, that's not how I choose to fight. But at the same time, I don't necessarily criticize how someone else chooses to fight when we're fighting the same fight. We're just fighting differently. And so I think that this is the voice this picture shows what it's like to be unheard, to be frustrated. We don't have to say whether it was right or whether it was wrong. But at this time, I think that this is someone just expressing their rage.
As the other panelists have said, I see anger, despair, and voices not being heard. I would like for them to take that anger and channel it in a way that can bring about change. Again, serving, marching, we had numerous marches this year, and being a part of those marches and educating people on voting, how to serve, how to make a difference. But I do see, again, that anger. And when you're angry, sometimes you're thinking off the cuff. You're not thinking, oh, I may not need to do this because there are consequences to my community. So that's my thought.
Wonderful. Thank you. Once again, audience, don't forget, if you are really enjoying our conversation, you can always make sure you like and share us. You can always visit us on Facebook Live, YouTube. All of these are always recorded for your viewing pleasure. We do have 2 more illustrations that they're going to briefly talk about. But as we continue to have those illustrations, please give us comments in the bottom to let us know how you actually feel about these illustrations as well. Remember, this panelist is for you, and so they would love to know your perspective. So the very last one, we're going to start it off with Mr. Keith Sutton. We have an impromptu photo that we're getting ready to share with you. And what does this picture mean to you?
Well, obviously the importance of the census, and I think, you know, most of us probably haven't participated in that this year. We know what that is and what that means. And of course, that means dollars, millions and millions of dollars that come into our community based on that count, based on the reapportionment that occurs every year. And so that's why the census is important. And through that, not just the reapportionment of Congress, but in that, you know, looking at our communities and the millions of dollars that come to support education, healthcare, mental health, substance abuse, and all kinds of things. So the importance of filling out that form is what I see, what comes to mind when I see that picture.
Wonderful. Okay, so the order still will go Miss Dreamer, then Miss Joanna, and to close out with Seneca. When we are looking at that, we're looking at the Census 2020. And don't forget, audience, make sure you comment about how you feel about the Census 2020. If you feel it is great, list it. If you feel it's irrelevant, list it. If you are unsure, list it, as our panelists can go ahead and gauge off of those conversations.
So the census is something that was very important. Here in Alamance County, we get about $1,800, a little bit over that, per person for the census that was completed. I spent a lot of time trying to convince people to do the census because there's still this distrust with between some communities and the government. And so we had to do a little bit of education and explaining to people that this is money that is invested back into your community, and not only invested back into your community, but hold elected officials responsible for what they do with this money. If it's not being reinvested in your community, you know, they begged us to do census. There was all kinds of propaganda out talking about census. Okay, so now is the time to hold them accountable. You've completed, you've done it. Now hold people accountable for making sure that they take care of your communities with these dollars that they're going to get.
Wonderful.
What I see is misinformation. For example, I was told by my sister that she had completed the census form, and I said, "You did? You do it on your phone? How did you do it?" She said, "No, I submitted my information for the stimulus check." So that meant I did it, because as you know, there's false narrative again out about tying in the census to the stimulus check. I also, as Dreamer said, see people being scared and not filling out the form. Not filling out the form is detrimental to your community because we're missing out on the funds that we need, that our kids need. And those are like more schools in your community, better precincts when we vote, that type of thing. But again, not believing what you're always reading, but doing the research to find out what the truth is.
Yeah, and I echo a lot of the same things that's already been said by the other panelists. I mean, as far as the accountability, like what Dreamer was talking about, the money and funding that can come from the census by being counted, like Mr. Sutton was talking about, and like Jawan was saying about the misinformation, because I was talking to one of my friends and they thought the same thing about the census and the stimulus check, thinking that if they just filled out the information for the stimulus check, that was counting them in on the census. And so having to talk to them about that. And then it just showed me too on the fact of making sure that the people around you, the people in your community, are educated on the importance of the census. I feel like that working out here with, like, since me and Dream are both from Alamance County, working with people like Dream and other folks on trying to get folks informed about that, but then also just letting them know how important the census is, not just this time, but going forward, how important that census is too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we have our very last picture. And in our very last picture, I'm going to make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to say it, but I wanted you to think about it. So you may not say it all together or at once, panelists, but I just want you to use one word or one phrase to denote how you actually feel about this very last picture. And oftentimes that one word can be so powerful and it resonates with audience members. So I would love for you to use one word or one particular phrase that denotes this last picture. And we're no order. So any of you can go first.
For me, pride. Having a person of color, a woman of color in office, but also knowing that my hard work has paid off, but knowing too there's more work to be done.
For me, it's change. It's change, and we'll hold them accountable to the change.
Yep. For me, it's dignity back into the office, actually morality back in the office of the president.
I'm just going to say proud and happy.
Wow. So proud, moral compass, dignity, happiness. Some of our audience members said normalcy. Some of us said building a community. So this was wonderful. I just see great things just looking at the picture, just me speaking on behalf of myself. So I just see great things, just like I saw great things in this conversation. I want to thank the panelists so much for entertaining not only the audience, but also entertaining themselves as they got an opportunity to know each other through this illustration. Now, our next aspect is really when you're going to get your pen and paper ready, as they're going to discuss, now I'm counted, I have voted, now what? And they have discussed a political platform specifically for you to help with engagement. So if your hands are not tired, please get that pen and paper readily available so we can go ahead and talk about next steps. I have my wonderful sisters, Miss Tia, as well as Miss Pamela, who will be hosting the next step segment. Once again, thank you so much, panelists, for sharing so much of your forethought, and we truly appreciate it. Let's get ready. Next steps.
Okay, so for the next segment, we're going to be talking to the members of our panel about the next steps that they feel would be necessary for us to do. So, Dreama, you are up next, or up the first one up. Please tell us about your next steps.
All right. So a little bit about my next steps is just first is recognize that there is more work to do. I also want to recognize the work that we did. Even though our campaign was not successful at winning, it was a success because we had 3,000 more voters, Black voters, show up at the polls. And so it was beginning the process of building collective power. So as a community organizer now doing this work full time, that is what I plan to do, continue to build collective power. My other steps are to continue with voters education. One of the things I found out when I was out on the campaign trail is most people didn't have a clue what a county commissioner is. Most people didn't understand what the lieutenant governor does. So those big offices like president, governor, they have those concepts. And so I want to make sure that people understand municipal.
I think we are having some technical difficulties. So
She's back.
All right, Dreamer, I'm sorry. We're having some technical difficulties. Please continue.
Sorry. I'm not sure. My internet is, I'm not in a great place, and then my other steps are just turning my sights towards 2022, because we have some very key races in Alamance County, the DA, the sheriff. And so I want to spend time in the community, with the community, and making sure that we are choosing candidates that represent us. And so a important thing that I learned at Black Campaign School is that you do not choose the base chooses you. And so I want to be a part of the community, helping them with their sites for 2022. I know I want to run again, but it was a heavy year. And so I want to spend time working on base building, and at a later time, I will definitely run again.
My. I am so full, you guys. These perspectives have been amazing. And anybody who's not on one of the platforms that we're streaming on here in this conversation is really missing out. I did want to say, ask Dreamer something before we go on to our next panelists and get their next steps. But one of the things that you said was about the money and accountability. And that was one of the things that I was talking about to some friends earlier today, actually, is that how we hold those individuals who are responsible for making sure that our communities get what they're supposed to get based on the numbers that we get from the census. So can you speak just a little bit about how those numbers are gathered and how long it normally will take for those dollars to trickle down into the community based on the numbers that we have, and how people can hold those who are responsible for distributing those funds accountable?
Yeah, so someone else, maybe another panelist, can speak to exactly how long before those dollars. And I think nothing is normal this year, so I don't think any of us really exactly know how long before those dollars will trickle into our communities. But holding people accountable means like paying attention to things that are in the budget, paying attention to the land use plan in your county, paying attention to when they have public hearings, how are they, when they talk about dollars and talk about, community block grants and things like that, like follow the trail of the money, see how it's being used, make sure that we're using it where it counts the most, and we're not using the majority of our money in administration fees. So make sure that we're actually using them on projects in our county. And when we're talking about money too, we did not win the election, but some of these people that won the election, we need to follow the trail of the money that was invested into those campaigns, because you need to know where you're spending money at and who you're spending money with and who they're spending money with. So following the money is important.
Thank you for that. So I believe we have Jawan's next steps up next. Sora Jawan.
And I just want to say, Pamela and Consuelo, both members of the Great Knightdale Wake Forest Alumni Chapter. All right, piggyback on what Dreamer was saying about finances. Oftentimes with candidates running for office, not oftentimes, all the time that candidates run for office, they need our finances and our time. We need to volunteer, and volunteer is free. It means making calls, sending text messages, even doing old school mailing postcards. But we need to do what we must do to get candidates that look like us and are for us in office. We're here, we receive emails saying we need money. If you have $5, contribute that to the candidates that are running. The larger candidates, when I'm not, larger is probably not the best word, but the majority, people who don't look like us, they get the funding. And it's not oftentimes from people who are good people. But we are good people and we need to support our candidates. Another thing that we need to do is become active in organizations. I mentioned before about NAACP. Become involved in civil organizations that are about the things that you are about. Focus on those type of things so you can get the education and share with other people. And accountability. Al Sharpton, I heard him say on the radio on Wednesday, he said, promises made need to be promises kept. So we must keep Biden, Harris accountable. Their platform talked a lot about racial equality. Find out, are they doing that? Are they promoting people and appointing people whose platforms align with what you believe in? If they're not, call him, text the office, but let them know your complaints. Also, let our candidates know when we like what they're doing. They don't always need to hear the bad. Sometimes there are some good things they're doing. It's important to attend the school board meetings. Not right now, a lot of things are virtual, so it makes it easier for you. So attend the board meetings for the commissioners, the town hall meetings that the congressmen have. Just become involved. You've got to, and when you get involved, take somebody young with you. Let them see how the process works, because we don't oftentimes know. And I know working with youth, it's like they don't want to get involved in politics. Oftentimes they may not even want to vote, but they must, and they need to know how the process works. It's interesting to hear about the streets, the lights, everything that politics is local, and we need to look at it like that. Not just look at it as a presidential race, but when you get the ballot, turn it over. We must have judges in office that look like us. Keith mentioned earlier about the majority of the minority judges were not elected. Cheryl Beasley, she should have been elected, and it's a tight race, and I know she's probably still contesting the race, but it shouldn't have been to that point. We should have supported her. And those are things we don't often do. We don't support people that look like us because we have the the crab barrel mentality still. But we have to elevate each other. We have to promote each other. And again, help with the finances. Another thing with the 2020 census, it was starting on December the 15th, they're going to start doing the analysis. And so they're going to break down the demographics of who was underreported and overreported. And I have a feeling we're going to be in the underreported section because we were suspicious of the census. And when we're suspicious, we don't act on things like we should. But when we are on January the 20th, when the new administration takes over, we need to be aware that food insecurity is not going to end. Police brutality is not going to end. COVID-19 deaths will not end, and unemployment will not stop. But we have to realize that with change, things will happen. There's a lot of things that the new administration has to do to correct what the old horrible administration has done. So we just, again, have to support them, but again, keep them accountable for everything that is taking place. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jawan, for those comments and your next steps. Up next, we'll have Seneca's next steps. We look forward to hearing those.
Hello. So, my next steps, part of them are similar to like Jawan was saying. Stay engaged in your local and state government. Understand that your local city council, county commissioners, school boards, find out who your state representatives are. Stay informed on them people right now. Because I mean, I've seen this year with a lot of people getting activated and started understanding about voting, but I mean, there's still more to go. And then like Dreamer said, some people didn't understand what the county commissioners did. They did not understand the power of the county commissioners in our county. I mean, some people didn't even know who possibly the mayor of Burlington was, who the mayor of Graham is, how those governments actually ran. And also just understanding who's on your school board, what those people do, what are they trying to do, what is the policies they're looking over and stuff. And you can really stay engaged in those meetings now through virtual meetings, emailing these people. These folks are people who are actually in your community. I mean, some of them could be your neighbors. That was one of my neighbors when I was running for school board this year. That's what he told me. He was like, after my race, he was like, I thought it was just going to be awesome to have a school board member living right next to me that I knew and I saw every day. And sometimes I think people get lost in the fact that that folks like us are just here in the actual community. So you need to be making sure that they see you and they understand what your concerns are. Even if they're not trying to come to you in a public forum, go to them, continue to email them, continue to just show them that you're there and you're engaged. Because I feel like this year, a lot of people just think during the election time, people were engaged and people wanted to be involved then, but then after the election is over, they think everybody's just going to go back and sit down, and we don't need to do that. You do not need to go back and sit down. You need to continue to stand up, continue to voice your opinion to make sure that you're heard by these people who were just newly elected, and understand that there's going to be more elections happening, and staying involved in those midterm elections, in those city elections, just staying involved in those elections and staying involved with who those people are. Start to get yourself educated. There was a lot of people during this time who talked to me about the fact of them starting to learn about the budgets and about the education system and the things that they did not like in the education system, things they did not like in the infrastructure of our county. And so I was telling them, keep yourself involved in that. Start to educate yourself more on that actual information. So then next time when it's time to come around, you can be already there and understand that. Do not just sit back now and think like, oh, well, we didn't get this person in, so nobody's trying to hear me. Now, we do need to get the people in there who are just like you and is hearing you. But those folks who you feel like is not hearing you, continue to pressure them. Continue to make sure that you're showing your face to them and getting educated on what they're doing. Like Dreamer was saying earlier, follow where the money is. Follow where the money has came from these people. Who are the people who supporting them? And if you don't see that they're doing anything in your community, continue to call that out. Continue to make sure their voice is heard on that. And then my last thing was continue to work for your community. I mean, I still remember a speech that President Obama did recently on when he was talking about you get a little bit of change, then you work and you get a little bit more change. I mean, I know this year we were hoping for a big change. I mean, this big blue wave, this big wave of actual people who were trying to uplift these communities who were not being heard, who felt like they were so marginalized, nobody even cared anymore. And a lot of people got disappointed, like we was talking about with Sherry Beasley, I think about Judge Cubbage, with other races that was just happening here, state and local, to where I know talking to people in my community after the election, people were so let down because they thought so much was about to happen. And we need to then, with that, start to join these different agencies or groups or civil groups who is out here now that's been forming in the community. And these groups that are formed in your community that popped up during these times, you have to end up working together also. Like, we can't sit over here in one corner and be like, hey, that group is working, we don't want to affiliate with them. This group is working, we don't want to affiliate with them. Take the personal feelings for an actual person out of the race, because what you're trying to do is build a community of change, build a community that you truly want to see. And if you're going to build that, you have to work collectively and in a true collaboration with each other. I mean, I know recently me and Dreamer was just having a conversation around this. You have to start to treat this as almost like a job. Like, of course, some of these people, you do start to get these family feels and y'all are all working for the same thing. But in that work for the same cause, you have to go into it as true work. You have to make sure too, these political parties, that you're working with them and you're starting to hold these political parties accountable. Don't just let that party show up in your neighborhood during the election. If they're not showing up at any other time, then that's on them. You need to tell them that, hey, you're going to have to work for my vote. You're going to have to work for me to trust you. And these parties need to really get behind these candidates who are true candidates of their community, to talk to them and to start to understand them and start to understand the community that they're coming from and truly stand behind them. Don't Don't just push down what they're talking about to the side, because that's happened a lot of times in these communities. And we can't continue to do that if we truly want to see the change that we want in our community. So it's a lot of more work to do. Change has been started, but it's more change to do. So that means there's going to be more work to be done.
Oh my goodness, you guys. I'm about to shout up in here. I knew when we first started talking about this topic that it was going to be a hot topic, and we could not have selected 4 better people to join us tonight to have this discussion. Everybody, everything that you're saying is the reason why we wanted to do this. We wanted people to understand that just because we've completed the census and just because we voted and the election is over, it doesn't mean you just stop. It doesn't mean that you just sit down. And you have to stay involved. You have to be engaged. And disengagement has been a really big problem in our communities, and we have to work together to make sure that we become more engaged and more educated, and that there are more opportunities for us to educate one another and be able to build trust, because I believe that trust is a factor, a big factor in all of this now. Thank you so much for your comments so far. I might have to shout for real once Keith start talking. So Mrs. Sutton, if you would please share with us your next steps. And I just can't wait to hear what they are.
Thanks, and I'll try to be brief. And my 3 next steps are sort of grounded in equity, and I think a couple of them can actually be ways in which you can hold us as elected officials and public officials accountable. So my first one is focus on building organizational capacity for equity. And by that, I mean particularly with public officials, we need to develop leaders, particularly equity thought leaders, those that understand concepts around equity, those that understand how to operationalize equity, and that just doesn't happen. That requires training. That requires funding for equity training. That may be in conferences and things of that nature, but really understanding what equity looks like and how we develop equity thought leadership. And so we've got to build capacity in our organizations. For some of our larger organizations, that means hiring and putting in place or setting up an Office of Equity Affairs, a Department of Institutional Equity, hiring equity leaders such as a superintendents for equity, a director of equity in our schools and school districts, and other organizations. So we need these thought leaders who have a primary responsibility of focusing on issues around diversity and inclusion. So building our organizational capacity is the first step. My second, along those same lines, is being intentional and specific in addressing the inequities that exist in our communities that are really brought on by systemic and institutional racism. Again, going back to the work of our elected officials, much of the institutional systemic racism that is there because of longstanding policies, practices, and procedures that only really perpetuate racism in our systems and our institutions. And so we as elected officials have to eradicate those policies. We have to eradicate those barriers. Many of them are, quite frankly, sometimes unintentional. For example, you've got some school districts, and I will speak to schools often in education because obviously that's where I sort of rest my hat. But when I think about what we do in Wake County, and because we're a fast-growing county, we reassign students and redraw our attendance lines almost every year because we're opening 2 or 3 new schools and new buildings. But a lot of school districts aren't building new schools. They aren't growing in their communities. And many of those districts haven't redrawn their attendance lines or boundary lines for more than 20, 25, or 50 years. And so you start seeing communities of have and have nots, where you see redlining and other things take place that really segregate or resegregate many of our communities. And so we have to be intentional about what we're doing, and elected officials have to be specific. We have to call out when we see racism and inequities and speak to the needs of Black and brown children when we see that they're not being treated fairly. They're not getting a fair shake. When we're seeing, for example, disproportionate numbers of suspensions among Black kids and Hispanic kids, young Black boys being tracked into spec ed programs, or not seeing the more appropriate or proportionate numbers of students in our academically gifted programs. So we need to call that out, and we need to be specific about it. We just can't simply sit back and say all children can learn, or we need to make sure that we're all children given opportunity. We got to be specific about where we see those inequities lie. And then the last, I think we have to really, and you can figure out, it's not hard to figure out where I'm coming from with this one, but collectively advocating for more funding for public education. We already struggle with trying to get more funding for public schools, and we've seen cuts to public education both on the state and federal level. And now with the pandemic, we've seen even more of the inequities in our system be exacerbated. We've seen the technology gaps widen and being brought more to our attention. We will have human capital needs because we'll need to hire more social workers, more counselors. Students are going to be returning to school with all kinds of social, emotional issues and trauma. Trauma from loss of family members, trauma from loss of income in their homes, loss of friends and opportunity to socialize. And so we're going to see a ton of trauma in our students when they finally return to school at some point. And so we're going to need more teachers, more counselors, social workers to help address that. We're going to need to see more computers and devices and technology made available to our students. So we're going to need more funding, I think, what we've ever seen. And now is not the time to cut funding for public education. So when we think about the Leandro case and where we're still fighting now over 20 years to get more funding for our poor and our rural school districts, we need that funding and more to help support public education. So I think we all, as our organizations, churches, if you hold your officials' feet to the fire for nothing else, make sure that they are advocating for public education and advocating for more funding for our schools. So those are my three next steps.
Thank you so very much, and it's awesome that you had that platform of equity, because that's what we are grounded on. We are equity warriors, and so what we do, we want to make sure that every child in the state of North Carolina has an equitable education delivered to them by a highly effective, efficient teacher who is efficacious. And if we all work together to make sure that those inequities that do exist go away, then we've all done what we're supposed to do. So thank you so very much for your next steps. Thank you for partnering with us, because you're partners with us now. And we look forward to continuing those conversations on equity and social justice and all of the things that we've talked about so far. Tia, you're it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And throughout the conversation, we have some questions from our audience members. So the first question is, who do we contact for immediate involvement and change? And any one of you can answer that question.
I'll be first, and then I'll shout out my organization, Down Home NC. If you're in a rural area in North Carolina, we have 5 chapters all throughout North Carolina. Please get with these people. We are working on creating grassroots, people-powered change. We're not waiting on anybody to come and save us. We're saving ourselves. So I just want to shout out Down Home. And if you don't have a Down Home, find a grassroots organization that is member led and believes in people power, because an organization like that will work on the things that are most important to you and your community, and not just have their own agenda.
All right, would anyone else like to share what people in your community can do to get involved immediately for change?
I would just simply say, I don't know if there's a blanket answer for who you can contact for involvement in change. I mean, I think it's going to vary in every community. I would encourage people to, find your passion. What is your passion? What is it you are really passionate about? For some, it may be food insecurity. And so you might contact the food shelter or food bank in your community. Others, it may be education. So you may look at education organizations. You might just attend, as Ms. Patsy Simpson said, attend public meetings because you're here. If you're at city council meetings, county commissioner education meetings, school board meetings, you'll hear about some of the issues that they're talking about. And so I would say, find out what is your passion, what are the issues you want to champion, be it equity or what have you, and then find the organizations who are moving the needle when it comes to those issues. And that may be, again, your churches, it may be elected officials, it may be sororities or fraternities, but who's moving the needle as it relates to the issue that you are most passionate about.
Thank you so much for your responses. And we will have our next question, which is, what happens to those individuals who lost their elections? How can they continue to remain involved, or what can they do, or what should they be doing during this time?
I think I'll answer it since I was able to finally get back. So I was an actual person who ran for a position this year, and I lost in the race. And so I can speak from firsthand point of view on what I'm just doing. And what I'm doing is just staying involved in the community, staying involved with what's happening in our schools, at our school level. I've actually done visit a couple of classrooms over the past couple of weeks with teachers who've done invited me in through Zoom to talk to their students about my race and just about how it was for me in high school. And then things of just talking to them as the young folks who's possibly going to be voting in 2022 about the importance of voting and that civil duty. But then also working with organizations like, I know I heard Dreamer talking about the Down Home organization, working with another organization, Future Alamance, and working with those organizations out here in the community and trying to set up our own initiatives that we want to talk to these officials who did get elected on with these school boards or county commissioners, actually addressing them through our organization that way, and not just waiting to next time when it's somebody to run to try to bring up these topics to them. So those are a couple of things that I'm doing. And the main thing I just tell people is just stay involved. You had a passion to try to become that public servant for a reason. So stay involved with your public service. It doesn't, even if you wasn't elected, the public service can still be worked through whatever you do for your community.
All right. Would anyone else like to follow up to that question? If not, we will have our next question. How do we get our youth involved?
I'll speak on that. You have to go where they are. Get involved in the activities, find out what they're interested in, and then start, like Dream was talking to grassroots organizations, start an organization that's led by just you. Let them be the leaders, but you just be the guide. You give them guidance. You've got to go where they are. I don't listen to hip hop music. I'm R&B cameo, but if they want to hear some whatever they listen to, I'll go bob stop, do that. But just be available, be there, be present. That's what they want. They want to be heard. Sometimes they just want you to sit there and listen to them and just be there. And then once you do that and be present, they're more likely to get involved and be the leaders that we know they can be.
Thank you so much for your feedback. Our next question is, what is the best way to hold those who have been elected and have a responsibility to their constituents accountable?
I think the best way to do that is to be in contact with your elected officials. If you have an opportunity to meet with them and have a conversation, do that. If not, email, write them a letter. But I think they have to know. It's hard to hold them accountable if they're not aware of what their issues are. Obviously, if they're doing their work and they're in touch with their constituents and have the pulse of the pulse of the community, they will know what those issues are. And then from that standpoint, I think after that, watch how they vote as those issues come before them at their respective tables. Let them know what you're looking for, hear their point of view, and then watch how they vote. And if they don't vote in a way that you feel like is, and obviously they have to vote, they're voting for all constituents and not just one or one section of the community. They often have to represent an entire county or city or what have you. But I think just making sure that they know what those issues are and they can understand both sides of the issue is the best way that you can hold them accountable and responsible.
All right, thank you so much. And our final question, that's the same. Okay, so our final question is, how do you get involved in campaigns and voter education?
I think you get involved with campaigns by volunteering. If you're not working on the campaign itself, volunteer with the campaign, whether that's to make phone calls, whether that is to canvass or to fundraise, get involved and get to know your candidate and get to know their platform, so that part of voters education is going out to be able to go out and translate what that candidate believes and why the community needs that candidate. And voters education involves a little bit of patience, because although it seems very simple that people should know what the DA does, I assure you most people don't. And so you have to have a little bit of patience and compassion and grace with people that may be new to becoming civically involved during voters education.
Thank you so much for your response, Dreama. We want to thank you for coming out tonight. And up next, we have Consuela. Tag your it.
Good evening again. So I am honored to have been a part of this program. I have learned so much from each of you. Of course, I have taken some notes, and just know that I and we, and when I say we, NC Tag Team will likely be calling on you again to participate with us. But we do have certificates for each of you. So this is the certificate of appreciation, and it's presented to Dreama Caldwell for your continued dedication to advocating great change. Thank you for all that you do, and please continue the fight, and we look forward to continuing to support you. Next, we'd like to present a certificate of appreciation to Jawan Mitchell for her continued dedication to advocating great change as well. As she mentioned, of course, both Pamela and I are members of the Knightdale Wake Forest chapter. So we will continue to support Jawan, and I'm certain that she will continue to support NC Tag Team and our programs and our how we're trying to support our communities. Next, we want to present the certificate of appreciation to Seneca Rogers for his continued dedication to advocating great change. As stated before, you are now a partner of NC Tag Team, and we will support you, and we look forward to continually working with you. And last but not least, we present the Certificate of Appreciation to Keith Sutton for your continued dedication to advocating great change. Thank you all for all of the information that you have provided tonight for us. Like I said, and I'm going to repeat it again, we look forward to continuing to work with you, and we will definitely be calling on you again to support our programming, our calls, and also to provide us with some guidance.
Thank you for that.
If you enjoyed this conversation, we hope you will be able to join us on Thursday, January 21st at 6:30 p.m. on the same station, same channels. As we continue this conversation, we will be hosting a Count It, I Voted, Now What? Part 2. Because, of course, we couldn't get enough of it tonight. So we definitely have to continue this conversation. Then in February, on February 18th, 2021, we will be hosting a youth social justice panel. Hopefully you will join us and listen to what our youth have to say about social justice and being involved. And finally, on March 25th, 2021, we will be hosting a leadership mindset webinar featuring Principal Kafele. We hope that you will be able to join us for these upcoming events and support the NC-TAG team. Saida, TAG, you're it.
Hello, well, I have the pleasure of just enjoying us immensely. And we're going to close out to make sure that you can contact us via our Facebook page. So that's www.facebook.com at NC-TAG, you're it, URIT. Or you can follow us at Twitter at NC-TAG2. If you have really enjoyed our conversation and you say, hey, I'm a teacher, I'm an advocate, I'm an educator, I'm passionate about education, and I'm passionate about letting people be heard about informational topics, you definitely can join us. The easiest way to join is to text TAG, T-A-G, to 51555. That's text join TAG. Once again, that's text join TAG to 51555. And like I said, in our form and fashion, we love to go ahead and head you out. Now, what I would love for all of us to do is all of my sisters, that includes Pamela, Consuela, Tia, our panelists, will wave you out as we are going to have a wonderful time listening to our end story and making sure you understand our closing segments. These closing segments are brought to you by NC-TAG. It's brought to you by TAG You're It. It's also brought to you by our whole Constituent Foundation. Once again, we're going to wave you out. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, you are a warrior, and TAG You Are It.
We gotta fight against them, but we need numbers. We need to show up at school board meetings. We need to show up at county commissioner meetings. We need to have someone on the agenda to talk and know what they're talking